Well, I'm going to just tell you, here we are. We're day after Election Day. We don't have results yet. I want to share some things with you in this final segment, and I'm going to get through some states and what's happening in them. I'm going to start with Arizona. And you likely know, if you listen to my show very often, that Kelly Ward is a chairwoman of the Arizona Republican Party. There has never been a harder working chair of any Republican Party anywhere. She's a rock star. She happens to be a doctor, a medical doctor. She's also a former state senator in Arizona. She is now the chair of the GOP. To say that she knocked herself out in this election cycle does not begin to describe. So last night, fairly early on, as we're watching this map, in fact, I sent Matt the Wonderful this map. If you can put this up, Matt, this is where we are allegedly today and let's leave that up for a while, where we are today on this election cycle. You see the top left, Joe Biden, 238, and then top right, Donald Trump, 214. Those are the numbers of Electoral College votes they believe they have, and the net magic number is 270. So beneath that, you can see the red states have been declared Republican victories. Blue, the brighter blue are been declared Biden victories, and the pink and the blue, other blue ones are unsettled. I want to go through and talk with you about some of them. I'm going to start with Arizona. So last night, they called Arizona very early. They called it for Biden. And many people were lamenting. In fact, I will just say a short shot at Fox News. I mean, you try to think, where can I go online to watch or on television to watch? And I heard, dozens of very serious conservatives that I hang with and know just completely appalled and upset and unhappy with the coverage by Fox News last night. They seem to be, number one, buying into the effort to try to convince America that Biden has this, it's all over. Number two, willing to make calls for states where the numbers were not yet settled. And then on the other hand, if it was for Biden, on the other hand, making obvious calls for Trump, they wouldn't make them. So I'll start with Arizona. Arizona right now, the numbers are, they have 51%. These are as of the votes counted. And so they haven't counted all their votes yet. They're not talking about mail-in ballot, which is a whole other arena, just talking about votes. In Arizona, we had 1.411 and change votes for Biden, 1,318 votes for Trump. So it's 51% to 47.6. However, I reached out to one of my contacts, actually not Kelly, but somebody else, to say, because I saw last night as a state GOP chair, I saw Kelly Ward put out basically a statement saying, hey, Fox is going to be a little bit sorry that they called this so early because we aren't done counting and Fox is going to be wrong. Even today, I saw this morning, she had another statement out. This is wrong. We're not done counting. So here are the numbers to quick tell you. I mentioned it's basically the difference between, put that map up again if you would, Matt. The difference between 1,411, and this is Arizona, for Biden, and 1,318 for Trump. However, even as of, this is within a couple of hours before I started the show today, they have 500,000 ballots to count. So 500,000 ballots left to count. And they're trending because of what area of the state they came in from. Those ballots they've been counting are trending 3-1 in favor of Trump. So Arizona, at least as of now, I understand the pollsters have called it, the networks have called it, Arizona potentially very, very much in play. Next one I wanted to mention has to do with the great state of Pennsylvania. And I was on I do political analysis, and so I am interviewed on other shows. And I was on somebody else's show yesterday talking about the women's vote in this election cycle. But another person who was on that show was from Pennsylvania, and he's a pundit, and he was talking about the idea. He'd actually written a piece at American Spectator called "Why Donald Trump Will Win Pennsylvania." So he's talking about in Pennsylvania how if you drive anywhere in Pennsylvania, all you see, you might see a tiny little Biden sign tucked away in the corner of a yard, hidden, but you see houses, house after house, big Trump signs, Trump flags, stand up for America. Just major, major enthusiasm for Trump. His point in this one piece that he wrote about Trump was that the energy is overwhelming for President Trump in this election cycle and very little enthusiasm for Biden. Anyway, went along and explained how part of what happened was Biden is now, I guess today at least, settled on his position that he is anti-fracking, and this drove a lot of Pennsylvania working people to say, anti-fracking, not for me, we don't want this. So where we are in Pennsylvania, I shall tell you. Pennsylvania, the vote count, this map keeps fooling around with me here. I had the map. Okay, so in Pennsylvania, they had the count was, I'm going to get to it, in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump won an election night. So Pennsylvania was 52% for Donald Trump, 52% to 46.8. So over 5 points ahead, Trump over Biden in Pennsylvania. But they're saying they can't call it because they haven't counted the mail-in ballots. And I want to remind you what's happening in Pennsylvania with the mail-in ballots. In the great state of Pennsylvania, they have, by the way, elected judges. So the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the state court I'm talking about in Pennsylvania, is elected by the people. And the people in Pennsylvania had an election where they had so the judges, majority Democrat judges on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And the mail-in ballot thing happened where they just have put out massive mail-in ballots. And in Pennsylvania, they've had that Pennsylvania Supreme Court rule that mail-in ballots sent in without a date on them, a postmark, a date on them, must be counted. So the deal is you're supposed to mail in your ballot on or before Election Day. You're not supposed to be able to wait till the day after the election and say, hey, now that I think about it, I see it looks like so-and-so won. I think I'll mail my ballot in for the other guy. You're not supposed to be able to do that. So but you're supposed to have actually gotten it postmarked on Election Day. The Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania had ruled that if the postmark was illegible, but it arrived within 3 days of the election day, or if there was no postmark. Somehow, things do make it through the mail unpostmarked, you get to count those. So the combination in Pennsylvania, they're counting mail-in ballots with no postmarks. The Supreme Court has said, no reason to compare the signature on the mail-in ballot with the voter's registration. No signature comparison. Every other state, in fact, especially states like Oregon that have had long time had mail-in ballots as the norm, the majority thing they do, have a very strict, very stringent. You compare the signature on the mail-in ballot to the signature on your voter card, and Pennsylvania saying, nah, you don't have to compare signatures. So anyone can sign, if they find someone they can sign for, send it in, and they're not making comparisons of that. And the third huge factor was, they voted that they ruled that there was no basis to allow poll watchers. So, no postmark, or postmark, too blurry to read at all, and no signature verification, and no poll watchers, as they say, what could go wrong? And so many pundits were writing about the fact that Pennsylvania appeared to have been set up as though they were going to be sure that Biden won Pennsylvania. It's a huge number of, let me go back and do that to me again, a huge number of ballots, of electoral votes you get for Pennsylvania. It is 20 electoral votes. 20 would, put Trump almost, get him much closer to his 270. Again, on the election day, he's at 52 to under 47%. So he's, over 5 points up over Biden. And for 20 electoral votes up for grabs, and now they're counting ballots in Pennsylvania under rules that many people are saying, this doesn't sound right. This just sounds like they're setting him up to win. One thing I started out in the first 5 saying today, and I'm going to get back to the point as I close up today, but it's not just that I have the opinion that I will never accept as a fact that a majority of American voters would choose the party in this election cycle in 2020 that has gone socialist, is supporting Marxism, that can never denounce socialism, unlike the Republicans can, that is engaged in support, agitation, and encouragement of left-wing groups that are rioting all over this country, that support the defund the police movement, and that have somebody running who is obviously corrupt, has been involved in truly unethical deals with China, the number one enemy of America, whose son, Hunter Biden, who has no education or background or experience at all in the world of energy, but got put on Burisma board and was paid $50,000 a month. There is a lot of jobs people do for $50,000 a month to do nothing. He had no jobs. He sat on the board and got $50,000 a month. In fact, Giuliani is now saying, no, it's got to be more like $80,000 a month, and doing nothing. His singular qualifying factor, the only reason he was qualified, is because he's connected to his dad, the then vice president. You have major evidence of corruption. Not only do I not buy that the majority of the American people would vote for that, but I think there are many, many Republicans who also do not buy this. I think there are Republicans in this country, and I don't know the percentage, but a groundswell that's going to say this will not stand. This will not stand. We're not going to let the Democrats steal this election, and that's what people see in places like Pennsylvania. They're worried about, they're concerned about the idea that Pennsylvania was set up ahead of time to allow the Democrats to use the process of the mail-in ballots to allow them to win the election, when in fact Trump won it hands down on the ground on election day, when everyone really normally used to vote. So then we talked about Arizona, we talked about Pennsylvania. I want to hit quickly on Michigan. I saw something, I think it's right. The Trump team is actually filing a lawsuit. The Trump campaign's filing a lawsuit in Michigan. Again, with Michigan, there was, on the day of the election, let me tell you where it came out. On the day of the election, the difference, it was being called for Biden. They had 16 electoral votes. They have 2.6 million for Biden at 49.9, and they had for Trump 48.8. So Biden up by 2,684,000 and 2,617,000. So very, very tiny minority difference, tiny number of votes. And again, in Michigan, they're looking at mail-in ballots. There was a little fluke in Michigan that I was going to correct because, in all fairness, you have to try to be truthful. Always be truthful about everything. In Michigan, there was a big story out that over 100,000 mail-in ballots have been turned in, and from one particular area of the state. It was from Shiawassee County, something like that. Very odd name, but in any case. Mail-in ballots from that county have been turned in, and there were over 100,000, in fact, 153,710 votes, mail-in ballots turned in Michigan from that county, and they were all, 100% of them, for Biden. So you can imagine people saying, wow, what are the odds of that? I mean, there are many senior voters who use mail-in ballots, and mail-in ballots are more popular with Democrat voters than Republican, but they're also more popular with older voters who tend to be Republican. So who knows? Pretty bizarre circumstance, and there's a lot of commotion and upset about the idea. How could all 153,710 mail-in ballots from one county all be for Biden? It turned out there was later, they did announce just a little while ago that there was a little bit of confusion there. They missed it by a digit, and so it wasn't really 153,710. It was only 15,371. So 15,000 new mail-in ballots, but they were all for Biden. And that does make people kind of wonder. The mail-in ballots, as we said many, many times on the show, is a playground, a recipe for fraud. Mail-in fraud to win an election, and this is what this is why I say there are many people in this country that say this will not stand, because if you counting the actual victories and the election day victories, which include early voting. Early voting and election day victories, but somehow mail-in ballots are going to turn elections. And we watched this happen in California, I think it was in 2018, where several majors, like 5 U.S. House seats, that were held by Republicans got flipped, and the Republican won it on Election Day. So the combination of early votes and Election Day voting, but the mail-in ballots counted later, flipped the seats to Democrat, and there was, of course, a lot of concern that that was not valid. So we are facing a time in America where you have many, many people deeply, profoundly concerned about whether or not this is simply we're watching an effort of the Democrat Party to steal this election, an effort, by the way, viewed by many as to having been started way ahead of time, planned ahead of time in terms of using COVID, exaggerating the response to COVID so people are scared to death, leave their homes, and then use the fear of COVID to justify massive mail-in ballots, which every Democrat knows, everyone involved in politics knows. Mail-in ballots are just a playground for fraud for someone determined to steal an election. So a few other states, we're about out of time here, but we had Pennsylvania, just a huge judicial issue in Pennsylvania. Trump up, as I was saying, 52-47. You have North Carolina, Trump up 50% to 48. North Carolina is still they're still counting their mail-in ballots. Georgia, listen to this, Georgia again, Trump up 50.1 to 48.7. They're still counting ballots. And I'm just getting at the idea and telling you folks that this isn't over. I don't ever want the Republicans or conservatives or patriots of any kind to agree to surrender an election because the other side is trying to steal it, or because they're threatening violence, or because their supporters are supporting violence in the streets of Washington. And you heard Kyle Scheidler talk about other places violence is expected and happening all over this country, will continue to happen. We cannot surrender the White House because of pressure from the media, them calling elections too early, waiting for the facts, for having mail-in ballots, seem to be popping up, all going one way and supposed to all go well. I guess that's how it was. I guess every single person, all 15,731 people who did mail-in ballots in that county, they probably all love Biden. That's reasonable to assume. There has to be some willingness, and this is why I'll wrap up the show today and turn to my why it matters. But I think that there are many, many reasons people are grateful that Donald Trump won election and is again fighting for re-election here in 2020. Because he's a fighter, because he fights, because he's not going to give in to pressure and say, okay, I see we have violence in the streets. I see we have Antifa and Black Lives Matter and shut down D.C. and all sorts of other extremely dangerous, nefarious left-wing groups threatening us. So let's just give in. To make peace, we will give in and lose the election. This is never what Donald Trump would do. It's not what his team will do. He's got his lawyers ready. Both sides of the aisle have their lawyers ready, still have lawyers ready to roll. They're filing lawsuits or challenging decisions by state election chairs. They're challenging decisions in all sorts of cases in which votes get counted with the basic notion, and I will tell you again the difference. On the left side, they're so determined to bring the radical left to power in this country that the anything goes mentality applies, even with respect to voting. I'm not saying as to every Democrat. There are plenty, millions of honest Democrats in this country who, for whatever reason, still vote Democrat. Maybe because their dad was in a union, or because their grandmother made them promise to always vote Democrat, or maybe because they really are Marxists and socialists and they want the Democrat Party to become that. Millions of people in America voted for the left because they actually believe in something the left stands for. I understand, I will concede that. But the people who are pushing the buttons at the top of the party are determined to use any means necessary to get Joe Biden over the finish line. And he won't be president for 5 minutes, but still get him over the finish line. The Republican side is determined to be sure we actually follow the law and that we get results of this election consistent with the will of the American people. That is what Donald Trump is pushing for. That is what his lawyers are pushing for. There was a commentary earlier today. I didn't grab a clip of it, but it was Sidney Powell was interviewed somewhere, and she was talking about the left is using their lawfare organization and method, the lawfare thing they used to go after Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, to go after everyone that they wanted to get rid of in the Trump administration during the whole Russia collusion hoax thing. And basically, Sidney Powell is saying the left is going to use that lawfare mentality again in this election cycle. They're going to use it to push to get Joe Biden in the White House by hook or crook. What every American should want on both sides of the aisle, and whatever political party or no political party at all, what every American should want is honesty in the balloting. We should want to have open, transparent elections. The idea in Pennsylvania that there aren't going to be poll watchers able to watch the counting of the mail-in ballots is beyond absurd. I didn't get time to go to the rest of the other states, but the other states still in play. Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina. We'll talk about those maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow we have Frank Gaffney joining us on the show, and he's just going to be talking about, kind of what he sees on the ground in Washington, and also the priorities that the Trump administration should have, assuming they move into a second term next year. What priorities, national security priorities, America faces in this election cycle moving forward, and the concerns he would have if a Biden administration were to take over and take America in a different direction with respect to our national security policy.